interrupt my groove today. Been watching gray skies move away. I just don't think that I can lose, and I might just take a cruise and let the sunshine play. Something more, something new, something you get a...
What's good, everybody? Back again, another Monday. Monday the 9th, cooking into the spring. Summer's right around the corner. As always, joined by my buddy, Drew. Drew, what's going on in your world this evening?
Not a whole lot, man. Good to be back with you as always. Of course, want to get a check-in and update on how the weekend was there for you, Kentucky Derby. You know, I know you were heavily invested as far as the weekend is concerned. Did you have a good time?
Yeah, I had a great time. It's kind of a little exhausted now. It's like a week-long thing. I was up at the track on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at a Derby party, then Saturday's the Derby. Fun event. Anybody that hasn't been down for the Derby, and if you like to gamble and you just like to party, oh my God, it should be a bucket list item. It's a great time. But I didn't get to watch much golf except for Sunday, so you'll have to fill me in a little bit on what happened at the Wells Fargo.
Yeah, I mean, it was essentially the whole week was just a bloodbath. I mean, with the rain, there was times on Thursday and Friday that you thought that the course wasn't even playable. I know they were playing lift, clean, and place, but just standing water everywhere. It was really a grinded out kind of tournament. I think Saturday was the brunt of the issues that they came across. I mean, I think there was only 3 people that shot under par all day Saturday. Wow. So it was really just kind of hang on and hang tight. And then even Sunday, I mean, Max shot, I believe, 2 under to finish at 8 and get it done. But that's a long, stressful week, especially dealing with the conditions, umbrella out, umbrella down, new glove, trying to keep the grips dry, right? It's a week that definitely will wear on you. And don't look now. I mean, Max Homa's got 4 wins since 2019, so that's pretty impressive for a guy that I think somewhat slides under the radar. I don't want to say that because I know his personality, he's a big social media guy, but I think like when we talk about some of the better golfers on tour, I don't think his name's really brought up. Maybe it should be. But yeah, definitely a good week. I know that the guys will probably are going to be thankful to not be playing in conditions like that this week. And so it's interesting to see the field this week, who's playing, who's not. I know we got a big tournament, another major championship next week. But for the guys that played last week, it was pretty brutal.
Yeah, it sounded like it, and congrats to Max, and yeah, kind of turned into a very consistent player. But I'm excited to move to this week. It's 1 week closer to another major, and a lot of chatter going around on Twitter that's been saying that you are the Craig Ranch whisperer. Like you know it better than anybody else. So you played out there a few times. Why don't you fill us in? Lay us down with some knowledge, preach to us. What are we going to expect, or the pros going to expect at the ranch this weekend?
Yeah, so I had the privilege to play, I'd say probably 6 or 7 times I played TVC Craig Ranch. As you know, I was a teaching pro and golf professional down in Dallas area. And so this has kind of been one of those events that's kind of rotated. We went from Trinity Forest, which is somewhat of a mediocre stop, to TVC Craig Ranch, which I will also say from tour standards is another mediocre stop. Listen, it's a pretty wide open ballpark, not a whole lot of trouble, only a few hazards out there. It's at over 7,400 on the scorecard this week. A lot of that is with, if I remember correctly, 2 par 4s from the tees I was played at least 470. So I'm assuming they're probably in the 480, 490 this week. And then there's 3 par 3s over 210, 215 yards. So a lot of that distance, as we talked the last couple of weeks, is coming on, 5 specific holes. But overall, I think it's going to be an interesting week to handicap because I don't feel like there's a specific course detail that you can hone in. Hey, I approach is the strong suit this week, off the tee is, because I think it's kind of, you can pick and choose what it is. There's nothing that necessarily stands out here. But I think this golf course is suitable to just be lit up. Of course, it depends on the Texas wind. But I saw a forecast, looks like record highs going into this week in the 90s. So the course should be firm, it should be fast. And I would be very surprised if this doesn't go north to 20 under.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. We're probably not going to get conditions anywhere close like what we got last year. Yeah, it's going to be hot. It's going to be dry. And you laid it out really well. I'll just say one other thing I thought it was interesting, and I'm so surprised. One of the highest numbers I've ever seen from this range, but almost 35% of approach shots come from 200 yards plus. So pretty surprising. Uh, yeah, and so kind of an interesting week. It's always an interesting week when you get the week before a major. Everyone's talking about are they going to be geared up? They're going to be rolling for this week instead of next. We don't know. The big guys, maybe more or less, they're not going to get up for an event like this as they normally would. And so we got that going. It's kind of an interesting field too, pretty top heavy. But I'll just say one thing, kind of looking back on the last couple of weeks, it's been, chalk has hit. And I always worry that if chalk hits, for those who don't like to play a little chalk, it can kind of maybe flow into some inconsistencies. So we start like chasing our own tail. I hear a lot of podcasts. People said, gosh, I looked at the winning lineups the last few weeks and here's what's happening. So I need to adjust my strategy based on what has happened the last few weeks. And we don't want to do that. It's kind of a long game. And, whether your strategy is where your cumulative ownership is near 100 or where it's near 50, if it works for you, stick with it, because what is true is that almost 100% of the time is a unique lineup wins the GPP. So that should be your goal. So however you get there is up to you, whether it's, again, 100% cumulative ownership or 50, just stick with your same strategy as long as you can. And don't, if you kind of run a cold streak or chalk has hit the last few weeks, don't abandon your strategy. And then the other way goes that if chalk doesn't hit, don't abandon your strategy. We can kind of get paralysis by analysis with all the kind of information out there that swirls around. So trust yourself. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there because it's been a couple weird weeks, but I think we get a nice week this week. Feels a lot better than maybe it has the last 2 weeks. And then obviously we get a major coming up. But before we dive into the Brian Melson, anything, Drew, on your mind you wanted to check in about it all?
I think that's a great point that you made, because I think that we need to analyze each week as the course we're playing and the field we're playing. Even though chalk may have kind of hit the last 2 weeks, that's not something that necessarily is going to continue and be consistent. So again, we always talk about process. If your process is fine, again, there's going to be a lot of the weeks that we just miss completely, and that's fine. This isn't something we're going to be winning at a 70% clip. You get your few good weeks a year, and you hope that they're good enough to make it profitable by the end of the year. I do think another little nugget on the golf course is interesting to me, because this course is not a great barometer of what we're going into next week, right?
Yeah.
And I know that the tour tries to set it up somewhat to where, the course you're looking at has some similarities to the course coming up as far as major championships. We're going to see none of that this week. So what's interesting to me, we see a lot of guys that'll go out and we talk about it a lot, just kind of play shots and try to fine tune their game. But when you're really at a course that has no real similarity to where they're headed, that's the interesting kind of gray area for me. And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays. I'm interested to see how the top of the board plays. To your point, it'll be top heavy. But when you're looking at a course this week that's completely different from next week, how do you go about your prep for a major championship, right? Like, you're not worried off the tee. You're going to hit a lot of fairways. You're going to hit some long irons, which may be similar to what we're going to see next week. But it's just these courses aren't alike at all. And so I think that's interesting as well. And I know Ryan said that Ryan Palmer and KH Lee are members here. I certainly think that there will be a big Texas narrative this week with the guys, especially with Spieth and Scotty and whatnot, and KH Lee being the previous winner. So interesting. There's no correlation with golf courses, so it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. Maybe not as much of a tune-up as these guys are used to.
Yeah, and guys, the big dogs might be just using it to say, hey, I want to tighten the screws with the irons or the driver or whatever. So yeah, we get that, but it gives us an opportunity to, especially once we find out what ownership might be. And so let's start taking a look at the board. One thing I really kind of want us to maybe lean heavily tonight and maybe next week too, is that one thing that I think really separates great PGA DFS players from not so great. And I think I'm like Tambo and a few others who do this really, really well, or at least what I think they do really well, is identify the right pivots. Playing chalk, and I was talking to Andy with this, playing chalk is inevitable, especially with all the data out there. You can't not play chalk, but identifying a guy or two or three to pivot off of and then to have a low opportunity to pivot on is what can kind of really separate yourself. And we get an opportunity of that this week, and use an example. So Scotty and I think JT obviously are going to garner some ownership. Then there's going to be a break. DJ not going to be highly owned. Jordan maybe, Decky, Xander maybe not so much. And then we're going to see a ton of ownership starting with Burns and Zalatoris. And so, yeah, Scotty and JT, especially JT, will garner ownership. But maybe who are you thinking between DJ, Spieth, Matsuyama, and Schauffele? Who of those might be a good pivot on, or which one of those who may fly under the radar? Again, we don't know ownership right now, but any of those guys that you like?
Yeah, I think it would be DJ for me. And again, like I know Xander's coming off the team win with Patrick Cantlay, but I do agree with you a lot because I do believe that Burns and Zalatoris garner a lot of ownership because of the drop off that you mentioned, which leaves a guy like Neiman also extremely interested to me. Played a lot of good golf lately. He's at kind of the bottom. So if you're looking at things and you have Neiman sandwiched between Zalatoris and Brooks, I do think that you can catch some low ownership with Joaquin Neiman, but just with Dustin Johnson, hasn't been playing a bunch, missed the cut at the RBC, had a good showing at the Masters and the Players. So I do think his game's starting to come around. He just hasn't been playing a ton. And again, at this point, it's been over a year since he's won a golf tournament. And I don't think that the talent is not there. But he's done some good things ball striking wise. It's just kind of really what's held him back's been the putter. If you look at it, there was 4 straight tournaments. He lost strokes on the greens. So that's something he's going to have to clean up. But I think the ball striking is getting to a place where I am very, very bold on DJ and probably Joaquin Neiman as well.
I like that. I'm hoping for DJ. And yeah, we mentioned Burns and Zalatoris. Yeah, rightfully so. I mean, all these guys are chalky for a reason. If you're listening to this or look, any sort of strokes gain data, why they're chalky. So at least I'm not going to spend too much time on them. We know like Willie Z might be I'm probably going to bet him. He's going to be a great bet. I don't know what I'm going to do with him in DFS. I'm just going to wait and see what the ownership says. But you're right. Neiman is not going to be highly owned. It's just really interested. Brooks is on a lot of people's outright cards. And so we'll see what that does to the ownership. But I'm really intrigued with Tommy Fleetwood. We saw Tommy's like showing life. Played well at the Valspar, played well at the Masters, and then played well at the RBC. And I know the RBC, it was largely due to the putting, but I mean, he still got around the course well. And then the Masters, which he doesn't have the greatest course history, and he got a top 15. That shows me that he's kind of in good form. And again, I think he's going to be 5% owned, so it's a great pivot option. And if we somehow would get that, okay, Zalatoris is going to be 25% owned, Tommy Fleetwood is at 5%. And maybe if they play this tournament 100 times, Zalatoris beats Fleetwood, 85 times out of those 100. But if we get that event where Fleetwood finishes top 5, Zalatoris top 20, gosh, that's a possible leverage opportunity, and that's what we're looking for in DFS because it's hard to predict what's going to happen in the golf tournament. What's a little bit easier is easier to predict, is where ownership and where leverage might be. So I kind of like Fleetwood. Anybody else in this range, Drew, that you're kind of leaning toward?
So of course I'm going to be playing Spieth, right? I know that's kind of, there we go.
Of course.
So I'm going to be playing Spieth just because and we talked about the ball striking numbers right now are bonkers, right? And we get that. And I do expect some ownership. Hideki's the interesting one to me. I know the injury concerns have been there. And I think you made a great point. It's like with all the data, all the roads lead to the same place when we're trying to handicap this. So, right, if we just go with the strokes gain data, we're all going to come up with the same guys, and it's differentiating and to your point, pivoting off a guy, right? like if you completely say, hey, this is a guy we're pivoting off of, we're not going to play, hey, you could be completely wrong, but I think that's where you kind of gain value. And again, strokes gain data leads us all to the same place. So your process has to be determining where you draw the line on who is in the player pool and who isn't. But I think we pretty much hit on everybody. I'm always real hesitant with Xander. I probably don't have a good excuse why. When equity wise is probably a concern. But the other thing that you mentioned that I find funny, and maybe I'll ask you, have you seen the same trend? I find that Brooks is on tons of outright cards, and it doesn't translate to ownership in DFS. And it's happened for quite some time. I feel like even though he's an outright on a lot of people's cards, it does not transfer to DFS. I feel like he's typically undervalued as far as ownership goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And it might be one of those you have to wait and see Wednesday night, because we've been seeing it more often that people's ownership projections are swinging Tuesday into Wednesday for the highest I've seen in ever, really, where there's just community steam on a guy and he might be projected at 10% Tuesday morning, and by Wednesday night it's jumped up and it's trending in the other direction. And so Brooks might be one of those guys. Yeah, we'll see. And maybe not. Maybe he will stay kind of low owned. The miscut at the Masters is really going to scare some people because he was popular that week. So we'll see with Brooks. I want to get your opinion on Jason Day. Played well last week. Is he showing signs of life? Can he do it consistently? Did he pass an eye test? Yeah. What are your thoughts, Drew, about Jason Day?
Yeah. So it's tough. So he did play well. So like the first 2 rounds he played well, and then Saturday he ran into, and I'm not going to fault him because the weather conditions were just of that. The other thing about Jason Day, he struggled with back issues. When you're in the cold weather and it's raining, it's kind of easy to get the back tightened up. A lot of 3/4 fan swings I saw from him last week. I feel safe going back to Jason Day. Again, I'm going to chalk up the kind of the meltdown that was the weekend, but he definitely passed the eye test. And it's good to see, right? Like Jason Day's been through a lot. And I think he's one of those players that's good for the game when he's on leaderboards. But his ball striking was really, really good on Thursday and Friday last week. Him creeping up into the 8Ks is somewhat hesitant, as far as the way he's kind of trended over, a 12-month model. But we can't really use that because his game's just completely different right now. Now, would I feel more comfortable playing him over Kokrak or Cam Champ? Absolutely. Because I think that the volatility between those other 2 players is way higher, and we could easily, just completely go off the, deserted land there. I think Jason Day will have a good week. He'll make the cut, and then we'll see what happens. But I would feel very confident with playing Jason Day. He'll more than likely be some guy I'm looking at this week.
Yeah, I like that. And then we move to the guy right below him, and that's Aaron Wise, who will be popular, but for good reason. Mentioned that 35% of approach shots come from 200 plus. He ranks 12 over the last 24 rounds in that. He ranks 3rd in ball striking. Actually ranks 9th in opportunity gain. Won this event before, albeit not at the same course, I believe. But seems like an Aaron Wise course, like a guy who struggles off the tee. You get wider fairways. So that's not going to blow anybody away because he's going to be very popular. And so it's interesting what we do with Aaron Wise. Again, we want to get some ownership, but it does create, if someone doesn't want to play Wise, if he's going to be 30% owned, it might be time to kind of pivot. And there's some interesting pivot opportunities in this range. I kind of like Seamus Power, who frankly hasn't been playing that well. A miscut at the Wells Fargo, surprising 27th at the Masters, and then 33rd at the Players. Obviously, people were on him highly earlier in the year and in the fall swing. But I kind of like Seaman this week. I think he'll be low owned. I think he'll be 5%, and that's a big GPP type of play. The guy I really, really like in this range is Lanto. He wasn't popular last week after a great performance in Mexico, but Lanto is coming off 5.6 on approach to the Wells Fargo, 3.4 in Mexico, gained strokes off the tee to green, playing really, really well, 2 straight top 15s, a top 10. Lanto's another guy I don't think is going to be that highly owned in this kind of mid 7K range. And yeah, he's a lot cheaper than Wise, but man, I still think that could be a good pivot opportunity. What are you maybe doing with Wise, and are you looking to pivot elsewhere?
I'm more than likely going to pivot off of Wise. And it's just going to be one of those lines that we have to draw. I really like the Sheamus thing, because I mean, if you look at it, he's missed 4 of his last 6 cuts. Okay, so on the just looking at it, it's not good. But what he did from essentially October all the way up until February was impressive. It was consistent. I'm not reading again too much into to the Wells Fargo based off of the weather conditions. And that's why you're probably going to get him somewhat lower owned, is because of those 4 missed cuts in the last 6 events. So I will definitely be in on that. I wanted to swing back to your boy real quick just to get the confidence level of where we're at with Gooch sitting there at 8,600. I mean, that's you're the spokesperson for Taylor Gooch. So,
well, so yeah, I don't have a read. The 14th at the Masters was kind of surprising, and so yeah, he could bring that form in, but that's a month away. I don't really like buying chalky golfers. Again, we don't know if Gooch is going to be chalky golfers, but I don't like buying chalky golfers off a layoff, especially in this kind of age range. It's different when you have JT and Rahm and those off a layoff, but Gooch, I'm just not sure. So it's really a wait and see approach. We know he's going to be popular next week. He's going to be a chalky play, whatever his pricing is next week. Gooch is already garnering steam for next week. It's kind of a home game for him. So I think that might carry over into this week. We'll see. But he hasn't been playing as well lately as he has in the fall swing. But that 14th at the Masters is impressive. And we know the talent of Gooch. He's a very talented golfer. But I just don't know if I'll get there. Just Fleetwood is I think the better DFS play than Gooch.
Let me ask you one other thing real quick, because I feel like a kind of a person that, and I know it hasn't necessarily been playing great recently, but I feel like Mark Leishman at 7,800 stands out to me a little bit. Especially with the way he plays, his ball flight in Texas. If there is any wind, I think it's an advantage there. And at 7,800, kind of sandwiched between Maverick McNeely and Seamus Power. I know we just said great things about Seamus. Any thoughts on Mark Leishman at all? I know the form's not been great, but 7,800 seems maybe like a little bit of an off number for Mark Leishman.
Yeah, 7,800, and he'll be low owned, and so I agree. Maverick McNeely is garnering some ownership, and I've seen a lot of people in the outright card. I don't understand it, and so
it always ends poorly with the high ownership Matt McNeely.
It does, and so yeah, you get Leishman, who is a known winner. It's same for Siwoo. Siwoo had a great tournament last week at the Wells Fargo. Really struggled on Sunday with the ball striking. He was all over the mat. But yeah, Siwoo's been so consistent as well. But yeah, I'm highly on Leishman. I love that you called him out. Hasn't been blowing the world away with strokes gained data, but he has the back class that you're kind of looking for if you want to pivot a guy low owned that can give you some leverage in GPPs. And so yeah, the current form's not there. Well, that's why he's going to be low owned, but he has the back class to do well here, and probably the course suits him. We know you figure he's won at Torrey, long irons needed there, long irons needed here. So I like that call.
Love it. Yeah. Again, I'm just looking through these, and I know it's early in the process, but you kind of look at what kind of names stand out based off salary. And that was definitely one. The only other one I want to hit on is Matt Kuchar. Has success at this golf course. Really kind of I played a lot of Showdown last week, just for, I don't know why, because it was just a shit show weather-wise. But Matt Kuchar was in a lot of my lineups, and it was a lot of fluctuation. But again, I touted Matt Kuchar last week as being like my favorite play. I think I might go back to him at 7,700. Last week wasn't a great week for him, but I think, again, I think course fit wise in the way he plays, this could be a good setup for him. I
like it.
Kuchar thoughts? You do?
Yeah, I kind of like Kuchar. With how long the approach shots are going to be, I do think scrambling is going to have some importance this week. Again, it's going to be a birdie fest. We know that, but you want to avoid bogey, and Matt Kuchar is best in the field scrambling over the last 24 rounds. What I do worry about is his ball striking, and his approach has not been good lately. And so that, and this, Might not be a Kuchar course, but who knows? He'll be low owned and crazier things have happened. He kind of reminds me of Brian Harman, who I have an interesting kind of feel on this week. We don't think this course would be a Brian Harman course, a birdie fest that's long. It doesn't suit Brian Harman's game, but makes me think of the 2017 U.S. Open, I believe, in Erin Hills, which is like the longest major ever. Brian Harman finished second to Brooks Koepka there, kind of out of nowhere. And we've seen that happen several tournaments that we don't think they're Brian Harman-esque events, but he goes and kind of surprise some people. Brian Harman, again, another scrambler, but also the last 24 rounds ranks 9th in ball striking and surprisingly 6th in opportunities gained. Again, may not be the best course fit for him, but at 7,600 in low ownership, he can pop. And there's a guy kind of right near him who I think is going to be so chalky, because anyone that puts information into a model is going to see Kurt Kitayama named pop. He's been playing so well.
Yeah.
But I really believe that Kurt has peaked and he is not going to keep this up. And so it's a buy low opportunity. You don't want to buy Kurt now because this is his highest. He's going to be very highly owned. And again, what goes up? Yeah. What goes up comes down. And so it's this law of physics. I don't think we see him, shoot 8.5 on approach and 4.2 on approach, 10.3 tee to green. I'm sorry, he's not that talent to keep that up consistently. So I'm going to love that his ownership is going to be so inflated that we can pivot elsewhere. And I like Harman as a pivot.
It's funny you mentioned the Harman thing. I think sometimes we'll like pigeonhole ourselves into a corner, right? So long golf course, long irons, super birdie fest. We all of a sudden just start eliminating guys off the board.
Right.
Which I don't think is the best process, right? Because we see all these golf courses, your point, Erin Hills, like, oh gosh, this is going to be all bombers. Well, it never ends up being necessarily that way. Yes, do the bombers have an advantage? Certainly they do. But that doesn't mean you can just start eliminating guys. And if you look at Brian Harman's strokes gain data, it tells you that, hey, he's a guy that you need to consider, regardless of the distance. He's been playing good golf. So I think that's a good point by you. It's like you all of a sudden assume, okay, this is a golf course for this guy, and it's not a golf course for that guy. And that's where you see ownership kind of get funky, and where you can find value is when everybody is all in on thinking, okay, this guy, doesn't work for this guy. So you look at it, you're like, okay, well, why can't it, right? And then you get him at 3% owned, and that's how you kind of run up these boards at a GPP.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, if ownership is key. If he's 15%, then an easy fade.
Yeah,
fade. 5%, which, hey, I'm fine throwing some bones on him. Keith Mitchell is kind of the similar way. I think he'll be a little bit more owned. But for you, Drew, I'm going to ask you about this low 7K range. But there's a guy that I'm partial for, and that's Dylan Fratelli.
Yeah,
we saw him in Houston almost win. I had a ton of leverage with him because he's my highest owned guy in my player pool at around 60 and was first going into Sunday. What Fratelli struggles with is off the tee. We get some generous fairways here. He's great on approach. He's gained strokes on approach. It looks like 7 of the last 8 events he's gained strokes on approach. It is impressive. So I'll be back on Fratelli. I don't think he'll be that highly owned either. What might you be doing in this 7K range?
It's interesting you brought up Fratelli because I feel like Fratelli is the ultimate low ownership guy because you just never know what you're going to get. And you just hope that you guess the right week. And I think that scares a lot of people off. I will be going back to Aaron Rye. And I guess he'll definitely garner some ownership just because of the way he's been playing. But at 7,200, you can do other things as far as building. Tom Hoge will probably draw me back in just because I seem to have a soft spot for Tom Hoge. The interesting guy that I'm considering playing is Carlos Ortiz, and that's right at the bare minimum of 7K in the 7K range. There's not a lot of strokes gain data that's going to support what I'm saying. But again, I think golf game and the way playing this golf course, the way this golf course sets up, I think it could be a good golf course for Carlos Ortiz, rather a flatter golf ball hitter. I think that his trajectory kind of works well with this. So I would say play Carlos Ortiz with caution. I'm going to feel confident. Maybe that's fake confidence. I want to hit on Matthew Wolff and ask you real quick. Matthew Wolff had a good week last week. does that bring all the nut jobs back out of the woods that are going to play Matt Wolf now? Because Matt Wolf, like players, they're a cult. Like they're Matt Wolf till they die. Like and sometimes for absolutely no reason.
Yeah.
I would be terrified to play Matt Wolf again this week. Where you at with it?
Yeah, I think he could be a great bet. I've seen 100 whatever to 1, maybe more than that. So a great bet. Yeah, I'm a little concerned with Matthew Wolff. He did fit top 25, but he didn't gain strokes off the tee. Yeah, he got 4 tee to green, 1.2 on approach. I mean, so nothing. It's going to be a wait and see approach. If he's under 10%, yeah, then I'll play some. Our good buddy David is asking about Noren. I like Noren. Noren always seems to go under owned and undervalued, and Noren's great. I mean, there's par 5 scoring might be important here. That's where you score. He ranks 13th last 24 rounds. He ranks 24th.
All 4 are reachable too.
Yeah, and he ranks
par 5s are reachable.
24 in ball striking, 11th on approach. He's going to be forgotten, and he has stats that make him feel like he should be $500 more expensive, and he's going to be low owned. Similar to Fratelli, he's gained strokes on approach and looks like 8 out of his last 9 events. So very, very consistent. What he does struggle with at times is off the tee, and again, you get wider fairways. Noren can go low too. We've seen him play well and at Birdie Fest. Thinking kind of the Rocket Mortgage and look back and the 3M again in the Birdie Fest. So I like Noren, David. I don't think he's going to be low owned at all. I mean, Drew, do you have any thoughts?
I think Alex Noren is one of my guys that I always find in my lineup. To your point, he's got 7 straight made cuts. He's got 3 top 15s in that stretch. In the last 5, he's been gaining across the board, strokes gain wise. A guy that just can roll his rock, right? Like the guy makes a lot of putts. So the thing I like about Noren is you can get away with kind of a lackluster ball striking performance from him because he tends to kind of make a lot of putts to keep himself into things. I love Alex Noren. And to your point, he always seems underpriced, right? It always seems like he could use an extra $300. I don't think he's a flashy player. I think he's a consistent player, as it shows with the made cuts in a row. I think it's a super safe play, and especially if you can get low ownership, it's a super smart play as well. So I'm with David on that one. I love it.
Nice. Well, I'm going to move into one guy in the 7K range before we get into the sickle range, and that's Nick Taylor. I feel like I've been on Nick Taylor all year, got a Nick Taylor problem, but he showed signs of life. We got a heartbeat last week at the Wells Fargo, 4.4 on approach, 7.4 tee to green, finished in 15th place. Really high on Nick Taylor. We'll definitely be back on him. Patrick Rogers probably will be back on him. Surprising enough, it just seems like a Patrick Rogers course can score. But then we moved into 6K range at 6,500. Adam Schenk played well last week, and I think it kind of carries over. 6.9 tee to green, finished in 9th place last week. 6,500. Is he trending in the right direction? We'll see. So really like the Shankster. Andy pointed out, and if you'll listen to his show, Paul Barjon actually kind of hitting the ball really well at near minimum price. Kind of surprising, 51st at the Wells Fargo, but it's his 3rd term in a row, gaining strokes on approach, off the tee to green. He's gained in the last 2. So if you need kind of a deep flyer, you can kind of go to him. David Lipsky is also interesting, kind of playing well as of late. So maybe look at him.
Nick Watney.
Yeah, well, yeah, I always love Nick Lotney, but I'm not in Joseph Bramlett. A lot of people are going to play, so I can kind of see that, but I'm not in love with the sicko range as much this week as weeks kind of past. Well, what about you? Anybody your plan?
Yeah, so I this is disgusting for me to say, but I'm going to be playing probably too much Danny Willett.
The Willett.
Yeah, and again, he technically owes Jordan Spieth his green jacket. But he's been playing really well lately. He's made 3 straight cuts. He's starting to play a little bit more on the PGA Tour, which is good. He's just really been consistent kind of over the last month and a half or so. I like it in this range. To your point, it's not great. And we talked about kind of how top heavy that this tournament was. The only other guy I'll throw out there is John Huh.
Huh?
Yeah. And it's just a good ball striker, right? He doesn't do anything good. He does everything okay. And he'll be dirt cheap owned. Again, I think you don't even really need to stretch down here for the most part. I think you can kind of start baking in the 7K and kind of go up where you want. But I feel like if you're playing people down here, it's kind of going to be hit or miss. I could talk myself into Rory Sabatini, which I love. He's got great hats. He's got good strokes strokes gained data around the green, but the ball striking's kind of everywhere. So I wouldn't really promote many guys down here. I'm with you, and yeah, Nick Watney, that's our boy and whatnot, but I cannot advise you to play Nick Watney.
Friend of the program, and I'd be remiss without mentioning the gym rat is in this field again. So look out for Michael Thompson. Always can make an appearance. Probably will still sneak into my player pool somehow. Well, this has been fun. Hopefully, let's build that roll for next week. Big week upcoming, and then gosh, the pace really picks up with the U.S. Open and then the Open. Get into the meat of the season. So before we close, Drew, you got anything else, my man?
If I put a gun to your head and say pick a winner, who are you going with?
Gosh, pick a winner. Frankly, and again, and we'll see what happens with DFS, but I kind of feel like Willie Z gets the job done. What about you?
I would love Willie Z to get the job done. I'm gonna go with DJ.
DJ, oh, I love that call.
I'm gonna go with DJ.
Do. I hope you're right. I want to see DJ.
I think it's golf's in a better place when he plays well.
He's got some perspective now.
Yes, perspective. Love it.
There you go. Well, Drew, I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody for listening. It's a great community. We love kind of sharing everything with you all. So good luck. Hope to see you up top the leaderboard, and let's have a good week. Take care of yourselves.